Hello and welcome to HKEXVoice, our podcast series featuring insights from HKEX's executives and industry leaders on topics relevant to Hong Kong's financial markets. I'm your host, 𝗙dzie𝗹𝗹𝟏. Special Purpose Acquisition Companies, or SPACs, have been quite a hot topic this year. HKEX earlier sought public feedback on the proposal to create a listing regime for SPACs in Hong Kong and has received many responses. Today, as we publish the consultation conclusions, we are very pleased to have with us Bonnie Chan, HKEX's head of listing, to talk about the final proposed model for a SPAC regime in Hong Kong, including what some of the key changes are and how this new listing option further strengthens Hong Kong's role as Asia's premier global listing center. Welcome back to our podcast, Bonnie.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Bonnie, to start off with, for those of our listeners not familiar with this topic, what is a SPAC?
Well, a SPAC is a type of company that raises funds through its listing for the purpose of acquiring a business at a later stage within a predefined time period after the original listing. The business which is being acquired is usually referred to as a de-SPAC target, and that transaction is called a de-SPAC transaction. I'd like to say that we believe the introduction of a Hong Kong SPAC listing framework will provide another attractive route to listing in Hong Kong, allowing more companies from Greater China, Southeast Asia, and beyond to seek a listing on HKEX.
Indeed. So, Bonnie, today the exchange published the consultation conclusions on a SPAC regime. How was the market feedback on the need for a SPAC regime here in Hong Kong?
I'm very pleased that we received close to 100 non-duplicate responses to the consultation paper from a broad range of respondents. The overwhelming majority of those responses to the consultation paper generally supported the exchange's proposals. A number of respondents suggested that some of the proposals should be relaxed to ensure that the proposed SPAC regime would be more commercially attractive to participants, and some sought clarification on particular aspects of the proposals. To maintain Hong Kong's reputation for high-quality listings and stable secondary trading, safeguards are included in our SPAC listings proposals, which are designed to welcome experienced and reputable SPAC promoters that seek good quality de-SPAC targets. We have sought to strike the right balance in our final proposals.
Can you tell us a bit more about the final SPAC rules and the key changes from the original proposal?
Sure. We have assessed the market feedback in the context of our regulatory objectives and made a number of modifications to our original proposals. First of all, we have removed the alignment between redemption and voting against the SPAC transaction. And the rationale for doing it is that respondents have told us that deal uncertainty would be too high and may lead to unintended consequences if the two are coupled. After careful consideration, we believe that we can decouple the redemption and the voting, provided that we strengthen the PIPE investment requirement to help support the de-SPAC transaction valuation. For those who are unfamiliar, PIPE, which stands for Private Investment in Public Equities, refer to the outside third-party investment for the purpose of completing a de-SPAC transaction that has been negotiated prior to the announcement of that transaction and is included in the terms of that transaction. We have revised our proposal to impose a staggered percentage requirement on the minimum PIPE and required significant sophisticated PIPE investment.
So, Bonnie, what are some of the other changes that we're seeing in the final rules?
There are two other major changes. First of all, we reduced the minimum number of professional investors at the SPAC initial listing. And secondly, we have raised the warrant dilution cap.
Bonnie, we note that some other markets are increasing regulatory scrutiny to SPAC listings. How would you see this impacting Hong Kong's SPAC regime?
I think it justifies our approach, which is to target only the high-quality end of the SPAC market. SPACs are complex and difficult to understand, even for seasoned investors. Unlike other regimes, ours provide a framework of regulation that mitigates risk with each element of that complexity, but without compromising the overall commercial attractiveness. However, I believe it shows just how mature our market has become that we can now accommodate them.
HKEX has long been tightening its rules and regulations on backdoor listings. How does the SPAC listing framework fit in with this approach? How would HKEX ensure the quality of SPAC listings?
Well, at HKEX, we are committed to maintaining market quality, which is the cornerstone of Hong Kong as an international financial center. Our SPAC regime is designed to reinforce this principle. We are well aware of the risks substandard listings through the backdoor pose to investors, their unfairness to IPO applicants, and how they can undermine our market's reputation. We have battled backdoor listings on several fronts over recent years, and happily we have seen significant improvements. From the outset of our efforts to build a SPAC regime, we have insisted that a company listed via a SPAC must meet the same eligibility and suitability requirements as a company listed via an IPO. We have not diverged from that objective, and that is what we have implemented. So, in no way could a listing via a SPAC be a backdoor listing.
There have been some comments that SPACs could become a dominant form of listing in our markets. What do you actually see as the purpose of allowing SPAC listings, and how will that impact Hong Kong's overall listing universe?
Well, we see listing via a SPAC as an alternative to an IPO listing, but not a replacement of IPO listings. They sit side by side, and one is not a better way of listing than the other. The advantage of listing via a SPAC to some companies is the method of valuation. The valuation of a de-SPAC target is arrived at through direct negotiation between the issuer, the SPAC promoter, and the investors. By comparison, an IPO is valued through a very different method, book building by a bank in which hundreds of investors, both institutional and retail, participate. Well, some companies prefer the SPAC approach because the valuation is arrived at through negotiation that is conducted in a way which allows the PIPE investors to spend substantive time and resources in studying the de-SPAC target, hence arriving at the agreed valuation. Such companies may include new economy companies which are at the forefront of innovation, for example, where very few market participants have the expertise necessary to know a company's worth.
So, Bonnie, the SPAC regime will be rolled out in January 2022. Would you expect there to be very strong interest in SPAC listings based on your communications with market participants?
Informally, we are aware of considerable interest, and several prospective SPAC promoters and intermediaries have already approached us to inquire as to the procedures for listing. So we think there may be a bit of a race to win the crown of the first SPAC listing in Hong Kong. Although we are optimistic towards market reception, we will, of course, give each application due consideration under the rules based upon its own particular facts and circumstances. I have to admit, though, it will be an exciting moment for the HKEX, my division, and Hong Kong when the first one does list.
Indeed, Bonnie, this is really an exciting moment for Hong Kong and for HKEX, and we look forward to the first SPAC listing. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure to learn more about Hong Kong's SPAC regime, and we look forward to the rollout in 2022.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
For all our new listeners, if you want to learn more about this podcast or our SPAC consultation conclusions, please visit our website at hkex.com.hk. From all of us at HKEXVoice, thank you for listening, and keep an ear out for our next episode. So long.